Germans invaded a lot of countries in Europe, and their army was pretty good size. However, when the United States sent all of their troops to England, and then they invaded Europe by landing at Omaha Beach, which somebody asked about, which is on the coast of Normandy, which is on the coast of France. Then it was the Allies, which were made up of Britain, America, Canada, South Africa, Australia, a lot of countries. They were called the Allies. And that army became much larger than the Axis army, which were the belligerents, the people that they were fighting against, which were Germans, Italians, and Japanese. Japanese never got into Europe because they were in Asia fighting Americans and Australians and so on. So to answer your question, the Allied army in Europe was much larger as time went on than the German army. But to begin with, the German army was the largest.
Give you guys an idea of numbers. Maybe you can talk about how big a division is, how big a branch of the army might be, things like that.
Well, we figure a regiment, a battalion was about, say, 1,500 troops, made up of three infantry companies, and then a couple of support service company, and the transportation company, what have you. Yes.
How many people did you have in your group?
As a forward observer, each forward observer group had a tank assigned, a Mark IV tank, a Sherman tank. We had a Jeep with real sophisticated, the best radio equipment, because we had to have good communications. We had to spot our targets and call for fire, direct certain commands that we sent back through the radio to get the artillery adjusted. These are all backgoes to lay these concentrations of fire down to accomplish different types of missions.
How many men in that group?
In my forward observer group, I had a tank crew of 5. And then I had had a radio operator who was my driver, where we used to switch back and forth. Rank in those days, but you didn't even wear your rank because you didn't want to give. You were so close with your troops that you gave up all that yes sir and no sir and all that fancy stuff.
6 or 8 guys in each group?
Figure about 6 to 7. But normally we operated with at least tank crews were usually a little bit short, usually about 5 or 6 people, including the forward observer.
Did you ever get any sleep?
You what, honey?
Did you ever get any sleep?
Get any sleep? I tell you, honey, it was very difficult. I tell you, sometimes you sleep sitting up in your Jeep, and when you have so conscious of all different types of fire, because you're right on the front lines. You have mortars firing at you. By the way, the difference. Artillery, we had an expression. You can always tell a guy if he's really telling the truth about combat. You call it fire going in and coming out. Going out was our fire. Coming in was their fire. And if you could hear it, it was artillery fire. Because believe it or not, you could hear the gun pop. And you could hear the whiz of it coming all right in. You could almost predict where it was going to hit. But very different with a mortar. A mortar, there was no sound to it. Because in an artillery tube, they had like lens and grooves that started off for an artillery projectile, whereas a mortar that they put right between, it shoots it right straight up in the air and lobs in. You don't get any sound from that at all, so you never know where they're going to hit. They sound like mines. By the way, one of the big things worldwide, we all hope and pray for that they do away with mines completely. Because they are bad. The Germans were very effective in laying out minefields. Oh, you did? Well, you'll think of it. Yes.
Were you ever attacked at night during attack? Oh.
Action doesn't, you try, most of the action at night is patrol or sneaking behind enemy lines, things of that type.
Are you talking about from other prisoners when he was in the prison camp? Is that what you asked him?
No.
Said when you were a kid.
Oh, I knew something I wanted to tell you before I forget it. By the way, we might try to figure out how long this all takes. This is the initiative of when you really want something bad enough, regardless of how you feel or anything. We got away from the Germans on the 21st day of January 1945. Went all the way across Poland, I mean from one border to the other, into Moscow, Russia, stayed there for like 3 days and 4 nights, flew back to the United States on one of the presidential planes from Yalta, arrived at my home on the 24th day of February. 3 days over 1 month. You think we didn't want to get back to the United States quickly? That's what you can do if you really get down to the nitty-gritty.
Were there rats at the camp?
There was little bits of everything, yeah. Little bits of everything.
How big were the rats?
Pretty good size.
Oh, they taste pretty good.
Yeah, they tasted pretty good too.
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yeah, great.
Oh, of course, right.
This back then you get to see the
Medals. You guys, if you missed the medals, you can see them on your way out. Okay.
Okay.
Are any of the guys? We have a lot of students here that are in the military. A lot of guys in the Navy.
I was going to ask that
Anybody else have
question.
any questions?
How many of you are Navy youngsters? And in the Navy, let me tell you, I used to speak to the years ago to classes over to submarine school. Young class, let me tell you something. Those young gentlemen that go through that submarine school are the Navy's finest. Let me tell you, there's no submariner in the world that'll come near the young American submariner. Well, when they get in that submarine, they go down under. God help anybody that comes anywhere near them. And the same way with the young American soldier. Don't let anybody ever kid you that some of these fascist countries and all had the best soldiers, best military. You get the American serviceman or the young lady backed up against the wall, and boy, let me tell you, you got a rough road to hold. They're going to stand up for their own in any war, anyway.
Did you capture anybody?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Did you take any prisoners up the other side, yeah?
Well, I tell you, but to be honest with you, I was within that, we were lucky to be alive within 1 month. I had 28 days of actual frontline duty. And I'd been hit once and captured as a prisoner of war during that time.
Is it true that the Germans used to cut off their eyelids so they wouldn't fall asleep?
Prisoners.
Yeah. And is it true that the Germans, they used to cut off their eyelids so they wouldn't fall asleep during the war?
Cut off their eyelids?
Yeah.
Prisoners. I read it in a book and I was telling the class.
Oh, yeah?
Some of the POWs, they cut their eyelids off. Did you ever hear
That's
about it?
possible. I tell you, most of the people that were in our camp, they were of the older class of German, of the Wehrmacht, and they respected, because we had some top Army leaders, officers in our camp, like Gerald Patton's son-in-law. They all knew. You always give them the code of conduct. You give them the name, rank, serial number, and your date of birth. Just those things. That's all you ever give them.
Say one thing to soldiers now about what about before they went to war, what would you?
He asked if you were to say one thing to service people now in the armed forces now before they ever have to go to a war, what would you like to tell them?
Just the fortitude. I tell you, there's two things I used to try to motivate our own troops with always. Two expressions, you might write it down. rise to the occasion and rise above the situation. Rise to the occasion and rise above the situation. And if you have that inside of you, the proper attitude and the proper motivation, and a good leader, which we've got thousands of them, good leaders in Frederick. We hope we never have to fight another one. That would be the answer to all of them.
When you got hit by the grenade, how did they find your place and throw the grenade? How did they know you guys were there?
Well, we were upstairs. So they finally took the upstairs section of the house. I was out cold. That's why I came to down in the basement of the same house. We were sitting right on top of a Corps headquarters. We didn't know that. The Corps headquarters staff, what was left of the German Corps staff, was down in that basement of that house.
In the same house you were in?
Yeah.
Oh,
See,
I didn't hear you say that before.
these houses, Italian houses, had walls on them like this thick. It goes back to the early history, where they're all built up on top of the hill.
How thick?
Oh, walls on at least that thick. You could, they had monasteries that an artillery shell would hit it, and it'd just be a little cloud of dust walk, but it wouldn't even put a hole in it. They were so thick and
What question over there, Jim?
If somebody tries to picture what it's like on the front line, what would you tell them? Like, how would you picture it be on the front line?
Pardon me, the picture on the front line?
What was it like to be in the front line? How would you explain it to somebody?
Well, it was just constantly alert. You had to have people, rotation of people, and somebody awake all the time. And you had to keep naturally no lights, everything dark. Sound, keep all the sound down. Because you can hear amazing nothing at night. The stillness of night, you can hear a sound so far away, it's unbelievable. You know.
I could go to that.
This is an hour class after a lot of kids just had dinner, so
Oh,
if anybody needs to
yeah.
go to the bathroom, you don't have to ask
By the
permission.
way, I'll tell you, I've never seen such an attentive group. And I'm gonna get some other things together. I haven't done any of this in so many years. I got an autographed picture of George Patton from Fort Knox, Kentucky, and a few other things. I gotta spread out with grandchildren so much of this stuff. If I can get some of this stuff together, I'll arrange with your master here and set up another time to show you all